as Vicky said, everybody, their interest in serving the chapter, I can tell you, it's been very rewarding for me over my career. I started serving on a committee and then kind of went into a committee chair role and then rolled onto the board, and through process elimination became the chapter president. But it's been a great experience to give back to the community and for professional development. And we thought this would be a good opportunity to make sure that you could have any of your questions answered about the process, about what's involved. And I know there were some questions submitted in advance, and my thought is, I'd go ahead and just start with those questions, and then certainly open it up to dialogue and conversation. So one of the first questions is, do we need to have served on a committee before? And the answer to that is no. There's no prerequisite to have served on a committee. Certainly not having some knowledge of the chapter and what the chapter does, particularly our mission and our strategic plan, which can be found on the website, would be important. And then the next question is what is the time requirement? So, I'll answer this, and maybe Vicky, you can chime in a little bit.
Sure.
So as a director, the time commitment is certainly the board meeting, which occurs, once a month, usually runs somewhere in the 2.5 to 3 hour range at the longest. And then you'll be assigned to work with the committee as a committee liaison, right? So you'll help coordinate, depending on the committees that you're assigned to. I would say in general, you might be looking at, 2 to 3, possibly 4 hours a month for that. Again, depends on where the committee is in their cycle of activity. Just some committees have kind of an ebb and flow. Certainly when you get to the fall, there's maybe a little bit more time as we go through the budget process. And then if you are looking at the executive committee role, there is a, I would say probably double that commitment in a given, in a given month. And, as a general statement, I would say you can probably do about 2/3 of your work, depending on what role you're in, during business hours. Maybe a third of it could be during non-business hours. I mean, Vicky, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's a realistic assessment of the time frame. I mean, obviously, there are, just like what we do in our own real jobs, there's ebb and flow to everything. And so depending on if you, for instance, as a director, depending on what committee you are a liaison with, as we proceed with events or specific programming that's taking place, it may very well be that it's more time, but it's specifically just coordinating and helping oversee and ensure that the committee is sort of got all the resources that they need, that they're moving on the right path, and that all the other pertinent individuals are communicated to, so that we aren't doing things in a bubble. So, but no, I think that timeline and time frame works. And until you get to president and stuff.
Any additional clarification needed on those two questions before we go forward? Does that make sense? And Anne and Laura, everybody can unmute themselves, correct? Do we have to unmute them? Or okay, yeah. And certainly feel free to use the chat box. So we'll keep going. So what is the application and selection process? So The application and selection process is obviously underway, and it's a multi-tiered process. So you can certainly self-select, self-nominate and apply. You do not have to be nominated to apply. There's also an opportunity where someone is trying to encourage somebody, they can nominate them to apply. Laura, the application deadline is July 23rd. I can't remember. I don't want to get out the wrong
checking
date.
right now. That sounds right.
But then what'll happen is the applicants will go into a nominating committee that I will chair, and we'll review the applicants relative to the needs of the chapter based off of your experience, what your application says, and there will be a phone interview conversation that will occur, and then we'll present a slate to the executive committee for approval, and then it'll go to the full board for approval. So
Jim, if I could chime in on one thing. I think it's important for people to understand that it's that we really want to promote the self-nomination, that this is not, don't wait for someone else to necessarily nominate you. That if you're interested in serving, then go ahead and put your name in for it. No one looks at that and says, well, that's self-serving. Like everything else in this world, if you don't step up, you aren't going to get that opportunity. So we really suggest that strongly and promote that.
So the question was, if you've been nominated, do you complete the self-application concurrently, or is there a different process? No, you go ahead. What will happen is, you've been nominated, you would receive notification that you've been nominated, and effectively that directs you to the application, which is the same as the self-nominated application process. And then just, in total, this is kind of a contradictory statement, in total transparency, the nominating committee is by design kept confidential. So the nominating committee, I've already put together a group of people that from various aspects of the chapter, but it is kept confidential, just so that nobody feels any pressure, and nobody's pressured by anyone to kind of go to somebody and say, hey, I hear you're on the nominating committee, if you can put a good word in for me. So all the communication that you get from the nominating committee will either be through myself or through Laura or Aaron. So even though they'll be on some of the calls, you won't know who they are. And that's by design. So are board members required to attend PCMA national events in person? No, there's not a requirement for board members to do that. As you progress, and if you're on the executive committee, there are leadership training programs that occur at the board meetings, and we get a number of slots to attend. Not everybody attends those. And what typically happens is the executive committee will look at how many slots we get from national for that year. It varies a little bit based off of capacity and chapter size. And then sometimes the executive committee will ask a board member at large to attend that training program and national. And again, it's something that's done usually by looking at the people from the chapter who are going to the event, but there's not a requirement for that. And next question is, what is the event attendee requirement for board members? Vicki, do you want to take that one?
Obviously, we want you to be able to attend as many events that we have as a chapter as possible, but there isn't a specific requirement. We all have other commitments in our life and in our work. So We would hope that you're able to attend some of the more major ones, but we have a lot of programs throughout the year. So our intent is not to bog you down with having to attend every single one. The hope is you want to.
Certainly. And, in the past, we've actually had some board members that have not, who are members of the Capitol chapter, but have not resided here. They've been remote. They might be, typically that kind of occurred on the supplier side, where they might be a hotel or a DMO individual who was responsible for this market, but didn't necessarily live here. And for the board meetings, there's always the option of dialing in, or I'm assuming now they're video calls, but when I was president, I don't think we had video technology. It was so long ago. So, but there is a participation requirement that you attend at least 2/3 of the board meetings if you're on the board in some capacity. Okay. Hey, Jackie, I don't want to put you on the spot, but certainly appreciate you joining the call as the headquarters rep, and certainly if there's anything you want to add throughout, feel free to jump in. Jackie works with the chapters to coordinate activities with the mothership in Chicago, and she's a fantastic advocate for the chapter, and and she's a great resource for us. So we're happy that she's here on the call. So what do the different roles entail? So in summary, you all work associations and or have some familiarity with associations, or you wouldn't be here, right? So the chapter governance structure isn't much different than probably some of the organizations that you're either working for or familiar with. What I like to remind people is the PCMA Capitol chapter is a 1,600 person organization. By all accounts, we are bigger than many national associations, right? When you think about it, right? There's a lot of national associations that are under that benchmark of 1,600 people. So I'll start with the director roles. The director roles are there to provide, strategic guidance and support, and primarily, spend a lot of time working with the committees, right? What we want the board directors to do with the committees is to help the committee chairs kind of move along the process. One, ensure that they're consistent with the vision and the strategic plan. Each year, the president has a vision for what they want to accomplish. That's woven into the strategic plan in some way. So the board liaisons with the committees make sure they don't get too far off kilter there. The other thing is there are times where there has to be coordination between committees. Like as an example, as the chair of the nominating committee at this point, there are things that are happening with social media, right, as it relates to the nominating process. That's actually coming from the marketing committee. So I'm not necessarily posting that. And in this particular case, Laura and Aaron are instrumental in helping us kind of play that role. And then the other key part would actually be if someone on the committee needed support from our management organization and didn't necessarily know where to go, or if there was a budget question, and if a motion had to be made requesting funds or something for a committee, that would usually be championed by the board liaison, at the board meeting. Then you get into the executive committee roles, which are secretary, treasurer, immediate past president, and president-elect. So kind of top to bottom, we are a chartered organization, so you are actually kind of officers of the organization in that role. Secretary is responsible for what a secretary would typically do in that capacity, organizing the minutes, making sure they're right, and keeping records of attendance. Treasurer has responsibility for finances, very, very heavy lift as it relates to, the fall for budgeting. We've done a lot to refine the process. The president-elect is usually in a kind of a learning and other duties as assigned special assignment role, depending on what is occurring at that time of the chapter. The president, obviously is overseeing the chapter for that year, works to set their vision, and kind of is the spokesman and representative for the chapter. And the immediate past is the fifth member of the executive committee, serves in a capacity, supporting the president, which, help out with committees as needed. So with those positions, the secretary and the treasurer are open on a regular cycle. The president-elect position rolls into the president position, and obviously the president position would roll into the immediate past president. So, Vicki, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you've covered it.
Yeah. And then, also at the executive committee, there are monthly calls with headquarters now, or I think they're monthly. So, Vicki,
Yes.
you're shaking your head. Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So you'd be on those calls as well with the lovely Jackie. So, every once in a while, you'll get a call from National if you're in a leadership role, if you overstepped your bounds, and they need to bring you back in the line. I've heard that happens, but I was never on the receiving end of any of those calls.
Right.
So any cost associated with being a board member, no different than being a member. As a member organization, a nonprofit, board members are expected to pay their attendance at, for the events when they attend both national events and for the, chapter events. But also, as a board member, you're still eligible for the scholarship programs and grants that chapter offers, as well as what headquarters offers. So, so I'll maybe stop there for a minute. Certainly hope I answered those questions effectively, and see if anybody else has any other questions. And there's a couple people here I know I could start calling out, but I wouldn't do that to you, Kay. I might do it to Leah, but Greg, and I know you think just because you have your picture up there that I know you're back there. Any other questions or anything you want to know? And certainly, if you don't want to answer now, you can always reach out to Vicki or I directly. So,
A couple of things that I could add that might be helpful to people. I think there's some sort of sense that there's this path that you take, and in some cases it is more of a straight one, where you're on a committee and then you roll into a director position on the board, and then you slowly but surely move up to the executive committee, and that certainly has been the case for lots of individuals. I mean, in my particular case, I was on and off the board. I was secretary, I was director, then I was off the board, then I was secretary at one point, I rolled off, then I was president-elect and president, and now, past president for 2 terms. I don't think that there's any particular path that you necessarily need to take. So I just say that because I want to ensure that people understand that when you submit for a position, and Jim, please, if I'm incorrect in this, please just slap my hand. But I would encourage everybody, when you're filling out that application, that if you're interested in more than one position, that you put your name down for more than one position, because otherwise the assumption is that you are only interested in that one piece, and in many cases that nominating committee has very difficult decisions to make, and there's a lot of really good applicants, and it doesn't mean that we don't want you, it's that we have so many to choose from. So putting you into various positions allows you to grow and allows us to not have to turn you away for that year.
Yeah, and I saw another question pop up, and Stephanie, I'll get to that question in a minute, but I don't want to lose my train of thought on what Vicky said. Yeah, right, it's not a direct line. So like my path, as an example, I was a volunteer on a committee. Then I ended up chairing the PDC. Then I was serving as a director, and then I went right from director to president-elect. So I actually never served in the secretary or treasurer capacity. So, but I was on the board before I moved into that role. And, as Vicky said, I know other people that, for whatever reasons, just said like, yeah, I'm done at treasurer. I have no desire to move forward. So if you self-nominate, question came in from, if you self-nominate, do you need to complete the nomination form by July 2nd or simply complete the application yet? You can, if you're going to self-nominate, your date that you're focused on is the July 23rd deadline. Okay. The July 2nd deadline is that way, if people are nominated, it gives them time to go ahead and fill out that, gives them still a good 3 weeks to fill out the application process. And just to add some color, to things, I can tell you, I mean, I've done a lot of things in the industry. I'm currently serving on 2 other boards, the Corporate Event Marketing Association board, SEMA. I also serve on the Incentive Research Foundation board. And all of those are a direct result of me serving on the PCMA Capital chapter. Mm-hmm. It was great for me in many, many ways to give back to the chapter and to learn so much. But I would tell you that both of those organizations, one of the things that they really looked at when I went through the nomination process was my involvement with the PCMA Capital chapter. I mean, they saw that as a plus, and it helped me with other things in my career. So, not only is it a great organization, volunteer, but I don't even remember how long I've been involved, but a good solid 12 years plus. What I learned from a professional development perspective by volunteering and the connections that I made exponentially helped my career and professional development in a way that would not have occurred if I did not volunteer. I mean, I can say that with a high degree of confidence.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that, there's no doubt. I'm not going to paint a picture that's unrealistic to anyone here. There are certain positions, some more than others, that there's a bigger time commitment to. And to say that you're going to get on the board and it's just about having your name on a board list is incorrect. But at the same time, you don't fill out that application and go to this extent to do this if you aren't really passionate about our industry and the chapter and where we're headed, and that whole vision and strategic plan that Jim spoke about. And I just gained so much. I have so many leadership skills that I didn't have before I, was on the board. It taught me some skills that I didn't feel like at this point in my career and in my life that, you could learn new tricks and yet you do. And there are times where it's a balancing act between that and your personal life and your work life and that kind of thing. But everybody I think is really supportive that's on the board because everybody's doing that same balancing act. So we're not asking anybody to go it alone. And that's exactly why you have, a president-elect and a past president, because they can kind of take on some of those roles and help out where needed to be able to support everybody in whatever capacity. So I just think that it's been a tremendous asset to me. And I serve on 2 other boards as well. And so, for someone to do that after they've served on the board for PCMA says a lot, because it's, this is, you could look at it a different way and say, I'm never going to do it again. But for me, it drove me to want to do this again for other organizations.
I think another thing too that's maybe a little bit unique to the Capitol chapter is, because of our size and the number of associations in this market and the number of service providers, supplier partners, for many of our members, the chapter is PCMA, because, easily 50% of our members never get to go to a national meeting, because of where they sit within the organization, or, they just, don't have the seniority, or they, an organization can only send so many people. And because of that, the education and the networking opportunities that are provided to our members really is their exposure to PCMA. And it's very, very meaningful, and it adds a lot to their career development. And so you do have the opportunity to have a strong influence on people's career and development in a positive way.
Any questions, any comments?
Hi, this is Komita Nanan. I am out of the Washington, D.C. metro area, Director of Event Marketing at a healthcare technology company. I just want to say thank you for having this session. I'm really pleased to hear about the time investment, certainly the benefits for engaging. It's I'll share that why I'm here is because I am looking for just other ways to network, to engage, to learn, to grow. I love my company. I just don't know if I see any more opportunities. I've been there for 10 years and we keep evolving, right? I mean, the events world constantly evolve. So I'm just looking for opportunities to keep my skills sharp, if you will, learn new ways of doing things and things like that. So I just want to say thank you. And I just want to share why I'm interested in exploring. So thank you for the insight and the information. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Komita, no, we're happy to do it, and you bring up some great points. Like I can tell you, when I first started with the Capitol chapter, I'm waiting for Jackie to laugh. I was like terrified of public speaking, and I got my first chance to speak on a panel, and then I found that one of my loves was a microphone, and so I mean, like, that's a skill that I developed as a result of the chapter. And there's lots of great networking and professional development opportunities. We've had other people that were in roles that I know one of the reasons they joined was they may have been in a registration role at their association, but they joined the professional development committee because they wanted to get event planning experience, and they couldn't get it at their organization, but they felt the quality of the events that we do at the chapter was enough that they could say, okay, I'm going to do this because that's something that I can then put on my resume that I do have experience in planning events now. So there's a lot of nuances and nooks and crannies of the benefits that you get from serving on, with PCMA in general, and in particularly Jackie's favorite chapter, the capital chapter. So.
And certainly, if you've got questions as you contemplate moving forward with this, that's what we're here for. I mean, I think this is the first time that we've done this. And, and more than anything else, it's an opportunity to clarify for people some of those questions that they have that they may not have known who to ask about or felt comfortable asking. And we certainly want to break down that barrier so that people do feel comfortable that this is, it's not an exclusive group, it's an inclusive group. And so we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to know all of the specifics regarding, this process and the positions and the whole nominating procedure. So if you've got additional questions, that's exactly what Jim and I are here for. And I would imagine that we can ask Laura or Aaron when they follow up with the link to our vision and strategic plan to each of you, that they send out our contact information as well, if that's okay with you, Jim.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, again, I hope you found this of some value. Also, thank you for your interest in the chapter and support of the chapter. I mean, again, it's your organization, and we want you to get as much out of it as you can. So certainly thank you for your interest, and we'll leave it at that.
All right.
Hey, thanks everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Have a great afternoon.